What if one of history's most legendary queens wasn't Egyptian at all? Cleopatra, the woman immortalized as a seductress draped in gold and eyeliner, wasn't just Rome's obsession. She was a ruler who played politics like a grandmaster, spoke more languages than most empires, and turned her very image into a weapon of war. Yet, the story we know about her, lover of Caesar, doomed partner of Mark Antony, was written almost entirely by her enemies. And Rome had every reason to twist her legacy. Tonight, we're peeling back those layers of myth to uncover the hidden chapters of Cleopatra's life, the strange, the shocking, and the downright unbelievable. Because the truth is, she was far more dangerous than the snake that supposedly ended her life. Not quite Egyptian. When people picture Cleopatra, they imagine golden thrones on the Nile, pyramids in the distance, and the Queen of Egypt reigning over it all. But here's the twist: Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian by blood. She was Macedonian Greek, descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals. Her family had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, yet not a single one of them even bothered to learn the Egyptian language. To them, Egypt was more like a prize villa than a homeland. Cleopatra was different. She spoke Egyptian, and not just Egyptian. Ancient writers say she mastered at least 9 languages, from Greek and Hebrew to Arabic, and even tongues spoken on the edges of the empire. While most rulers struggled to get through negotiations without an interpreter, Cleopatra needed no middleman. She could disarm a Roman senator in Latin, soothe Egyptian priests in their own tongue, and charm merchants from distant lands with a single phrase. This wasn't just intelligence. It was strategy. Every word out of her mouth was a way to build trust, earn loyalty, and keep rivals off balance. And in a world where most monarchs ruled from palaces, Cleopatra stepped into the streets, spoke to her people directly, and styled herself as the reincarnation of Isis. She wasn't just seen as a queen, she was believed to be divine. But of course, even divinity didn't stop danger from lurking inside her own palace walls. The carpet entrance. Cleopatra knew survival wasn't just about politics, it was about spectacle. And few entrances in history are as legendary as hers. After being forced into exile by her younger brother's advisors, Cleopatra refused to fade away. Instead, she pulled off a stunt so bold it's still talked about 2,000 years later. She had herself smuggled into Julius Caesar's quarters, rolled up inside a carpet. Imagine the scene: Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, in Alexandria for war negotiations, when suddenly his servants unfurl a rug, and out steps Cleopatra, perfumed, radiant, and utterly unbothered. It wasn't just an entrance. It was a statement. That single move transformed her from a queen on the run into the most intriguing woman in the empire. Caesar backed her, and with his support, Cleopatra seized back her throne. But it wasn't just politics that tied them together. Their alliance sparked a scandal in Rome, shook the foundation of Egyptian royalty, and set Cleopatra on a collision course with destiny. And this was only the beginning, because the palace intrigue that followed would be even deadlier than the wars outside Egypt's borders. Disappearances and sibling rivalries. Cleopatra's rise to power wasn't a fairy tale, it was a battlefield. And the enemies she faced weren't distant kings or invading armies. They were her own family. The Ptolemaic dynasty had one very twisted tradition: keeping power in the family. Cleopatra married not one, but 2 of her younger brothers. First, Ptolemy XIII, who was barely old enough to hold a scepter. Their marriage was less romance and more hostile business merger, and it ended in chaos. He conveniently drowned in the Nile during a civil war, a disappearance many suspected wasn't entirely accidental. But Cleopatra's second brother husband, Ptolemy XIV, didn't fare much better. He too died under suspicious circumstances, and though the official records stay vague, poison has always been the whispered explanation. To survive in her dynasty was to be ruthless. Cleopatra may have loved her family, but she loved her throne more. It's easy to see why the Romans painted her as deadly and manipulative. But here's the truth: in a world where betrayal lurked at every corner, Cleopatra's only real crime was refusing to become a victim. And as she tightened her grip on Egypt, she also tightened her grip on something far more powerful: her own image. Because Cleopatra didn't just want to be queen, she wanted to be a goddess. Branding herself a goddess. Cleopatra understood something most rulers never did. Power isn't just about armies or wealth, it's about belief. She didn't just rule Egypt, she performed Egypt. Unlike her Greek ancestors, who treated the land like a foreign trophy, Cleopatra embraced its traditions. She walked among her people, spoke their language, and declared herself the living embodiment of Isis, the goddess of motherhood and magic. Temples honored her. Coins bore her image. Every public appearance was staged to blur the line between mortal queen and divine ruler. It was brilliant. To the Egyptians, she was their goddess returned. To the Greeks, she was still noble blood. And to the Romans, she was terrifying. They didn't see piety. They saw strategy. Cleopatra wasn't worshipping gods. She was using religion as propaganda, welding her people's devotion into political power. This mastery of image would follow her everywhere. Whether entering Rome as Caesar's partner or sailing down the Nile in scented barges, Cleopatra knew how to bend perception to her will. And soon, she would pull off a stunt so extravagant, so outrageous, that even Rome couldn't stop talking about it. It involved a single banquet, a wager with Mark Antony, and a pearl worth a kingdom. The pearl trick. Of all the stories about Cleopatra, few reveal her flair for drama quite like the pearl incident. The Roman general Mark Antony once bet her that she couldn't host the most expensive banquet in history. To him, it was impossible. How much could even a queen really spend on one meal? Cleopatra didn't argue. She simply invited him to dinner. When Antony arrived, the food seemed ordinary, lavish, but nothing unheard of for a queen. He smirked, thinking he had won. But Cleopatra had other plans. She removed one of her enormous pearl earrings, so valuable it could fund entire armies, dropped it into a goblet of vinegar, and calmly waited. Slowly, before Antony's astonished eyes, the pearl dissolved. Cleopatra then lifted the cup, drank it in one swallow, and declared the wager settled. Whether the science truly worked or Roman historians exaggerated the tale doesn't even matter. What mattered was the spectacle. Cleopatra turned a simple bet into a statement. Her wealth, her confidence, her very audacity could reduce Rome's treasures to table garnishes. Antony was stunned. Rome was scandalized. And Cleopatra had once again proven that power wasn't always taken with swords, it could be won with spectacle. But spectacle was only part of her arsenal. Cleopatra's real secret weapon was something far more intimate, her beauty. And she wielded it like a general wields an army. Beauty as warfare. When most rulers armored themselves with steel, Cleopatra armored herself with allure. Her beauty wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon sharpened with science, ritual, and relentless control over her image. Ancient sources say she bathed in donkey milk, believing its lactic acid softened and brightened her skin. Hundreds of donkeys were supposedly kept just to keep her baths flowing. Her makeup wasn't luxury, it was strategy. She lined her eyes with kohl, not only for style but also because its lead compounds helped protect against infection and the desert sun. Lip stains came from crushed ants and beetles. Perfumes were blended from exotic spices, and her nails gleamed with henna. And this wasn't vanity. Cleopatra's beauty was statecraft. Every appearance she made was a performance designed to disarm rivals and captivate allies. When Roman envoys stepped into her golden barge and found her dressed as Isis, perfumed from head to toe, with incense curling around her, they weren't just meeting a queen. They were meeting a living myth. Even more astonishing, Cleopatra reportedly wrote a book of beauty recipes and remedies, a lost manual that combined Egyptian tradition, Greek medicine, and her own experiments. It's said to have included everything from skincare formulas to cures for baldness. Sadly, it vanished after her death, likely destroyed by Romans eager to erase her legacy. But Cleopatra's fascination with science didn't stop at beauty. Behind palace doors, she explored something much darker, experiments with poison. Cleopatra the scientist. Cleopatra wasn't only a queen, a lover, or a goddess in the eyes of her people. She was also a curious mind, some say dangerously curious. Roman writers who loved to twist her story claimed that Cleopatra conducted experiments with poison. not on animals but on condemned prisoners. According to these accounts, she tested everything from hemlock to wolfsbane, even snake venom, recording which caused pain, which caused spasms, and which delivered death swiftly and silently. To her enemies, this was proof of cruelty. But in Cleopatra's world, knowledge was survival. Assassins lurked everywhere, betrayal was expected, and she needed to know the most elegant way to control her own fate. This obsession feeds into the most famous mystery of her life, her death. The legend says she let an asp, a venomous snake, bite her in her final moments. But historians doubt it. Snakes are unpredictable, slow to kill, and hardly the neat, theatrical ending Rome described. More likely, Cleopatra used a poison she already tested, something fast, discreet, and impossible to prove. Was it her choice, a final act of control against Octavian's conquest? Or was it murder, quietly arranged by her Roman enemies and covered up with the story of the snake? We may never know. But what's clear is that Cleopatra's death was as carefully staged as her life. And yet, the story we've inherited about her wasn't hers at all. It was Rome's. Because after she was gone, her greatest rival rewrote her legacy forever. Rome's smear campaign. When Cleopatra died, her empire didn't just fall. It was buried under a story written by her enemies. Octavian, soon to crown himself Augustus, had everything to gain from reshaping her image. To him, Cleopatra wasn't a scholar, a strategist, or a ruler who spoke 9 languages. No, he portrayed her as a temptress, a foreign witch who ensnared noble Roman men with her eyeliner and her perfume. It was a smear campaign centuries ahead of its time. Her writings disappeared. Her temples were stripped or destroyed. Her children were paraded in chains through the streets of Rome. And Antony, her partner in power, was reduced to little more than a fool bewitched by the exotic queen. But here's the irony. Rome's attempt to erase her only immortalized her. By turning her into a cautionary tale, they made her unforgettable. Over the centuries, she was reborn again and again, Shakespeare's tragic heroine, Renaissance art's exotic queen, Hollywood's ultimate spectacle with Elizabeth Taylor's kohl-rimmed eyes. Each generation reinvented Cleopatra, but the real woman always shone through the cracks. A ruler who understood language, image, and power better than anyone of her time. Rome may have written the first draft of her legacy, but Cleopatra herself wrote the ending. Even in death, she refused to vanish. Cleopatra's life was more than scandal, romance, or a tragic death by snakebite. She was a strategist who bent empires to her will, a linguist who spoke directly to her people, a scientist who studied beauty and poison, and a queen who turned every entrance into legend. Rome tried to erase her by branding her a seductress, but in doing so, they ensured she would live forever. Over 2,000 years later, her name still carries the weight of mystery, power, and allure. So here's the real question. Was Cleopatra truly the last pharaoh of Egypt, or was she the first global icon, centuries ahead of her time? Either way, she left behind a legacy that no smear campaign, no empire, and no conqueror could destroy.